The sun was just rising over the golden dunes when young Kareem arrived at the Sheikh's palace for the very first time. His clothes were simple, his sandals worn thin, and his eyes wide with the awe of someone who had never before seen such grandeur. The white marble walls of the palace caught the morning light and glimmered like frost. Kareem paused for a moment at the gates, taking the sight of fountains shaped like desert falcons and gardens where flowers bloomed in perfect geometric patterns. He was nervous. He had been told that Sheikh Zayed bin Rashid Al Maktoum was a man of great power, but also of great kindness to those who serve him faithfully. Kareem had nothing to offer except his hard work and honesty, values his father had drilled into him since boyhood in their small desert village. His first task was in the stables, caring for the Sheikh's prize Arabia horses. These were no ordinary animals. Their lineage stretched back generations, and they were treated like royalty. At first, Kareem struggled to keep up with the pace. The other servants were quick and efficient, while he was still learning how to groom the stallions and prepare their feed. But he worked late into the night, refusing to leave until horses gleamed under the lantern light. The Sheikh noticed his diligence early on. During one evening inspection, he stopped by the stables and saw Kareem still brushing down the coat of a black stallion long after his shift had ended. "Why are you still here, young man?" the Sheikh asked, his voice deep yet gentle. Kareem stood straight. "Because the work is not yet perfect, master, and I wish to do it right." A faint smile touched the Sheikh's lips. "Perfection is a rare thing, Kareem, but your heart is in the right place." Over the years, Kareem's responsibilities grew. From the stables, he was moved into the palace kitchens, then to the household accounts. He learned to manage supplies, negotiate with traders, and keep the palace running smoothly. His honesty became legendary among the staff. Whenever there was a dispute over money or goods, Kareem's word was trusted without question. Yet, despite his growing value to the palace, Kareem never once sought personal gain. The other servants sometimes whispered about how easily he could have taken a few coins here or there without anyone noticing. But Kareem dismissed such thoughts. "Trust," he would say, "is worth more than gold. Once lost, it can never be bought back." By the time 20 years had passed, Kareem had become more than just a servant. He was a trusted confidant of the Sheikh. He attended important meetings, managed private correspondence, and even oversaw construction projects in the Sheikh's business ventures. The bond between them was built not on blood, but on loyalty and mutual respect. Still, Kareem lived simply. His quarters were modest, his clothes plain, and his meals no different from those of the other servants. To him, wealth was not measured in coins, but in honor. Then came the year that would test that honor like never before. A series of unfortunate investments, compounded by global market changes, plunged the Sheikh's business empire into heavy losses. Friends and business partners who once showered him with praise began to disappear. Servants quietly left the palace, seeking work elsewhere. Suppliers refused credit. The palace halls, once filled with laughter and music, grew quiet. One evening, the Sheikh called Kareem to his study. His face was drawn, his eyes tired. "Kareem," he said, "I cannot afford to keep you. The coffers are empty, and I have nothing to pay your wages." Kareem bowed deeply. "Master, I have served you for many years, and not once have I done it for the sake of coins. If you will still have me, I will remain with or without salary." The Sheikh stared at him for a long moment, perhaps searching for any hint of insincerity. There was none. Finally, he nodded, his voice thick. "Your loyalty is rare in this world. I will not forget it." From that night on, Kareem worked harder than ever, not for money, but to keep the palace running during the Sheikh's darkest days. He fetched supplies on credit from merchants who still trusted his word. He repaired furniture himself instead of hiring carpenters. He even sold his own few possessions to pay for urgent palace needs. Little did Kareem know, this chapter of hardship would one day open the door to a reward beyond anything he had ever imagined. The palace that had once been a beacon of prosperity was now a place of quiet endurance. The great dining hall, where banquets once welcomed dignitaries from across the world, sat unused. Chandeliers that sparkled like captured starlight were left unlit to save oil. The gardens still bloomed, but without the elaborate floral arrangements or daily maintenance they once enjoyed. Kareem noticed every change, not with complaint, but with a sense of duty. He understood the Sheikh's pride. A man who had built his fortune with vision and determination would not easily admit to struggle. Yet, the signs were plain. A half-finished wing of the palace left abandoned, once loyal friends suddenly too busy to return calls, and the echo of footsteps in halls that felt too large for the reduced staff. One morning, the Sheikh summoned Kareem again to the study. The curtains were drawn halfway, letting in a sliver of sunlight. The air smelled faintly of old paper and dust. Sheikh Zayed sat at his desk, going through stacks of documents with an expression that betrayed both frustration and fatigue. "Kareem," he began, rubbing his temples, "things may become worse before they become better. There will be days when I cannot provide even the basic comforts for the staff. You must prepare yourself." Kareem stepped forward, his voice calm. "Master, I am prepared for anything, so long as I serve with honor. My loyalty does not depend on your wealth." The Sheikh looked up, studying him. "You could find work elsewhere. Any merchant would hire you for your honesty alone, and abandon you when you need me most?" Kareem shook his head. "That is not my way." It was decided then, without fanfare, without contract, that Kareem would remain by his master's side, whatever storms might come. The coming months tested Kareem in ways he had never experienced. Without funds for hired craftsmen, he learned to repair palace gates with his own hands. When the kitchen could no longer order the finest imported spices, he went to the local souk and bartered with traders, offering favors instead of money. His reputation carried weight. Even in hard times, merchants trusted him to repay debts. Sometimes, he would walk to the markets early in the morning, wearing a simple linen tunic, searching for the cheapest fresh vegetables for the palace meals. The same traders who once served him lavishly now measured each sale carefully, but Kareem never complained. He paid what he could, always with gratitude. Inside the palace, Kareem kept morale alive among the remaining staff. He would share small stories to make them smile, tales of when the palace was bustling and the Sheikh's laughter echoed through its halls. "One day," he would say, "these walls will hear that laughter again." At night, when his duties were done, Kareem often walked alone to the palace terrace. From there, he could see the city lights in the distance, brighter than ever in contrast to the darkened palace. Some might have felt bitterness, watching the world move on without them. Kareem felt something else entirely: determination. One evening, a rare guest arrived, an old business associate of the Sheikh. The man came in a sleek car, wearing a tailored suit, his watch glinting in the lantern light. Kareem welcomed him politely and led him to the study. The meeting lasted barely 20 minutes before the guest left, looking impatient. Kareem overheard enough to understand. The man had refused to help, offering excuses wrapped in polite words. After the guest departed, Kareem stepped into the study. The Sheikh sat motionless, his gaze fixed on a single point on the desk. "They are all leaving, Kareem," the Sheikh said quietly. "When the table is full, they sit beside you. When the table is empty, they disappear." Kareem approached and placed a hand on the desk, not in a gesture of pity, but of solidarity. "Then let the table be empty, master. We will fill it again with our own hands." The Sheikh's eyes softened. "You speak as if you share my burden." "I do," Kareem replied simply. "Your burden is mine." By the end of that year, the palace had been stripped of many luxuries, yet Kareem's loyalty remained untouched. There were nights when he went to sleep hungry, mornings when his clothes felt too thin for the desert chill. But the thought of leaving never crossed his mind. If anything, hardship had only deepened his bond with the Sheikh. Kareem had seen his master in both triumph and defeat, and he knew that dignity could survive even when riches did not. He also knew, though he never said aloud, that the day would come when fortune would turn again, and when it did, he would not be remembered for the years of plenty, but for the days when the palace stood nearly empty, and yet he stayed. Kareem could not have guessed just how dramatically that day of fortune was approaching, nor how it would change the course of his life forever. It began with whispers in the marketplace. Traders spoke of sudden demand for dates and saffron in foreign markets, of shipping companies offering generous contracts, of construction projects springing up like wildflowers after rain. The city, which had been moving cautiously in the shadow of global uncertainty, was beginning to breathe again. Kareem noticed a change first not in numbers or ledgers, but in the way the merchants greeted him. The hesitant, guarded handshakes of the lean months began to carry warmth again. Smiles returned. Conversations grew longer. Some traders even hinted, "Tell the Sheikh there may be opportunities ahead." One evening, as Kareem was sorting invoices by the light of an oil lamp, the Sheikh entered the office. He was carrying a thick envelope and a look Kareem had not seen in months, one that mixed cautious hope with measured resolve. "Kareem," the Sheikh began, setting the envelope on the desk, "a foreign company has approached me. They wish to invest in our shipping operations. If this deal succeeds, it could open the door to more contracts, and perhaps even restore our standing." Kareem looked up, his eyes steady. "Then we must treat this as the first seed of a new harvest, master. Plan it well and tend to it with care." The Sheikh smiled faintly at the metaphor. "Yes, and I will need you more than ever in these negotiations." The next weeks were a flurry of meetings, phone calls, and trips to the harbor. Kareem accompanied the Sheikh to every appointment, taking notes, arranging schedules, and quietly observing the foreign investors. He noticed which ones asked genuine questions, and which only sought quick profit. When the Sheikh was uncertain, Kareem would offer a few words of advice, always grounded in his trademark honesty. In one meeting, a particularly aggressive investor proposed terms that looked impressive on paper, but would have tied the Sheikh's hands for years. Kareem waited until they left before speaking. "Master, they offer gold with one hand, but take the key to your future with the other. It is better to grow slower and keep control than grow fast and lose it." The Sheikh leaned back in his chair, considering. "You're right. The wrong deal now would be worse than no deal at all." It was during this time that Kareem began to see the Sheikh's old spirit returning. The man who had once been bowed by financial losses was standing tall again, his voice gaining strength, his eyes regaining their brightness. Then came the breakthrough. A partnership was finalized with a reputable firm from Singapore, bringing fresh capital into the Sheikh's shipping business. The docks once again bustled with activity. Cranes lifting cargo, ships arriving and departing under the desert sun. The palace, though still modest compared to its former grandeur, began to hum with renewed energy. But the Sheikh did not forget the empty days. He had seen how quickly fair-weather friends had vanished, and he had not missed the fact that through it all, Kareem had remained at his side, never asking for a single coin. One night, after a long day at the harbor, the Sheikh invited Kareem to sit with him on the terrace. The desert air was cool, and a full moon hung over the horizon. "Kareem," the Sheikh said, his voice reflective, "I have been thinking about loyalty, about how rare it is, and how it cannot be bought. When the world turned away from me, you stayed. You worked without pay, you gave from your own pocket, and you never once complained." Kareem lowered his gaze. "I only did what was right, master. It is you who gave me a place here when I had nothing." The Sheikh shook his head. "No, Kareem, what you gave me was worth more than any gift I could offer, and it is time I show my gratitude in a way that matches your loyalty." Kareem did not fully understand what the Sheikh meant until weeks later, when the new shipping contract began to yield their first profits. The Sheikh summoned him to the study, where a set of documents lay on the desk. "Kareem," he said, "I am transferring ownership of one of my companies to you. It is a small one, but it is entirely yours to manage, profit from, or sell as you wish." Kareem froze. "Master, I cannot accept this. I am your servant." "You are not just a servant," the Sheikh said firmly. "You are my most trusted companion, and I will not see your years of loyalty go unrewarded." The reality of the gift slowly sank in. This was no token of appreciation. It was the means to change his life forever. Kareem felt a rush of emotions, gratitude, disbelief, and a quiet sense of pride that his loyalty had brought him here. That night, as Kareem walked to the palace halls, he thought back to the day he first arrived, a young man with nothing but determination in his heart. He had never imagined his journey would lead here, but the Sheikh's gesture had planted a new seed, not just of wealth, but of trust, and of a bond that would outlast both poverty and fortune. What Kareem did not yet realize was that his life was about to transform in ways even he could not yet foresee. The morning after the Sheikh handed him the company papers, Kareem awoke earlier than usual. Sleep had come slowly, his mind turning over the reality of what had happened. A company. His own company. The words felt strange on his tongue. For 30 years, he had served another man's household, guided by the steady rhythm of obedience and duty. Now, he held the reins to something entirely his, a ship he could sail in any direction. The first time he saw the building that housed his new venture, Kareem approached it with the same humility he had carried into the Sheikh's palace 3 decades earlier. It was not large, a modest 2-story office near the harbor, with whitewashed walls and windows that caught the sunlight in a warm glow. A faded sign over the door bore the name, Al-Sadiq Trading Company. Inside, a small team of employees looked up curiously as he entered. They knew him by reputation. The Sheikh's right hand, the man whose word could be trusted even in the darkest days. Kareem greeted each one with a firm handshake and a warm smile, introducing himself not as the new owner, but simply as Kareem. "I do not see myself as above you," he told them. "I am here to work with you, not only to lead you. Our success will be built together." In the early days, Kareem spent hours learning every detail of the business. He walked the storerooms, checked inventory, spoke with suppliers, and reviewed ledgers line by line. The company specialized in exporting dried fruits, dates, and spices to markets overseas. It was profitable but small and in need of care to grow. Kareem's approach was simple but effective. Honesty in every transaction, fairness with every worker, an eye for long-term trust over short-term gain. When a supplier tried to inflate prices, Kareem refused to argue or threaten. Instead, he calmly reminded them of the Sheikh's name, the value of ongoing partnership, and the integrity that had kept business flowing for decades. Often, this quiet firmness persuaded them to return to fair terms. But ownership brought challenges Kareem had never faced as a servant. One afternoon, a shipment was delayed at the docks due to new customs regulations. The clients were furious, threatening to cancel their orders. Kareem, rather than sending an assistant, went personally to the Port Authority's office. He waited patiently in the crowded lobby, speaking politely with clerks until he secured the necessary approvals. By evening, the shipment was on its way. His employees began to notice something. Kareem was not a man who simply gave orders and sat behind a desk. He was willing to lift crates alongside laborers, negotiate with traders in the bustling souk, and stay late to ensure the books balanced perfectly. One of the younger workers, impressed, asked him, "Sir, why do you work so hard when you could hire others to do it all for you?" Kareem's answer was simple. "Because the company's name is now tied to mine, and my name must remain clean. Every coin we earn must be one we can be proud of." The months passed, and Al-Sadiq Trading began to grow. Kareem reinvested profits into better equipment, upgraded storage facilities, and even expanded the office slightly. The team grew closer, bound by mutual respect. Yet Kareem never allowed success to dull his humility. He still wore the same modest clothes, still walked to mosque each Friday as he always had, and still visited the Sheikh regularly to give updates. The Sheikh, now thriving once more in his own businesses, often listened with pride as Kareem described his progress. "You were always meant for more than servitude, Kareem," he would say. "But perhaps you needed those 30 years to prepare you for this." One particular evening, Kareem was closing the office when an older dock worker approached him. The man's face was weathered from years on the sun, his clothes smelling faintly of salt water and rope. "Sir," the dock worker said, "I worked with you years ago when the palace was struggling. I saw how you carried burdens that were not yours without complaint. I just want to say, men like you give hope to people like me." Kareem was quiet for a moment before replying. "Hope is like a lantern, my friend. It burns brightest when the night is darkest. I only carried mine because the Sheikh once lit it for me." By the end of the first year, Kareem's company had doubled its profits. Yet to him, the true reward was not the money, but the knowledge that he had built something honestly, without compromising the values that had guided his entire life. Still, there was one truth he could not ignore. Success was a double-edged sword. It brought opportunities, yes, but also new responsibilities, greater expectations, and the risk of envy from others. Kareem knew that the next chapter of his journey would test him in ways different from poverty. For wealth, too, could tempt a man to lose himself. And Kareem was determined that no matter how high he climbed, he would remain the same man who had once stood in the palace stables, brushing down a black stallion under the lantern light. Success changes many things, but Kareem soon learned that it often changes people most of all. When Al Sadiq Trading's reputation spread, the phone in the modest office rang more often. New clients wanted to sign contracts. Suppliers began offering sweeter deals, and old acquaintances, some of whom Kareem had not seen in years, started appearing with wide smiles and open hands. At first, he welcomed everyone. After all, hospitality had been a principle of his life since his days in the Sheikh's palace. But it did not take long for him to see the pattern. Some visitors spoke endlessly of friendship, but always steered the conversation toward loans, partnerships, or favors that seemed to benefit only themselves. Others dropped the Sheikh's name freely, as if they were entitled to Kareem's trust because of distant connections. One afternoon, a man arrived in expensive robes, claiming to be the cousin of a former palace servant. Over coffee, he presented Kareem with a once-in-a-lifetime investment proposal. The profits, the man insisted, were guaranteed. Kareem listened politely, asked a few questions, and quickly realized the proposal was riddled with risks and likely dishonest. "I am honored you thought of me," Kareem said evenly, "but I must decline. I do not gamble with what is not mine, and this company's future belongs not only to me but to the people who depend on it." The man's smile tightened. "You've changed, Kareem. Wealth has made you suspicious." Kareem simply replied, "Loyalty taught me to be careful." Even within the company, Kareem faced challenges. With growth came new hires, and not all shared his values. One new supervisor began cutting corners on quality to speed shipments, hoping to impress Kareem with higher volume. When a client complained about the substandard goods, Kareem called the supervisor into his office. "I hired you to guard the company's name," Kareem said, his tone firm but calm, "not to trade its honor for a few extra crates. If we lose trust, we lose everything." The supervisor apologized, but Kareem knew he had to be vigilant. Integrity had carried him through decades of service. He would not let it be eroded by haste or greed. Outside the business, Kareem's personal life was also changing. Neighbors who once passed him without notice now stopped to greet him warmly. Invitations to weddings, community events, and business gatherings arrived more frequently. Some of these interactions were genuine. Others carried a faint scent of opportunism. But Kareem did not retreat into suspicion. Instead, he reminded himself daily, judge actions, not appearances. He had seen both loyalty and betrayal before. Wealth merely put them in sharper relief. One evening, the Sheikh invited Kareem to dine at the palace, now restored to its former elegance. Over a meal of lamb, saffron rice, and fresh dates, they spoke of business, family, and the passing years. "You seem troubled, my friend," the Sheikh observed. Kareem hesitated before answering. "I am learning that prosperity brings its own trials, master. When you had nothing, people showed their true colors. Now that I have something, I must learn to see their colors again, and they are not always what they appear." The Sheikh chuckled knowingly. It is the same lesson in a different form. In hardship, you learn who will stay. In wealth, you learn who will take. The key is to keep your heart open, but your eyes sharp. Kareem took those words to heart. Over the next months, he established clear policies in the company, transparency in all dealings, open books for trusted staff, and a rule that no personal favors will be drawn from company funds. He also began mentoring his employees, sharing lessons from his 30 years of service. "Success," he told them during one staff meeting, "is like the tide. It can carry you far, but it can also pull you under if you do not know how to steer." One day, a situation arose that tested these principles more directly. A major client offered Kareem a lucrative contract on the condition that he exclusively use their shipping line, a company known for poor treatment of its workers. The profit was tempting. It would more than double the year's revenue. Kareem spent the night considering the offer, walking alone along the quiet harbor. The moonlight glinted off the water, reminding him of long nights in the palace terrace when the Sheikh had faced similar temptations. He asked himself what the Sheikh would do, and what the Kareem of 30 years ago would want him to do now. The next morning, he declined the offer. "Our honor is not for sale," he wrote in his reply. "Not for any price." The refusal cost the company in the short term, but strengthened its reputation. Word spread among clients that Al-Sadiq Trading would not compromise its ethics, no matter the profit. New, more principal partners soon filled the gap. As Kareem closed the books at the end of the year, he realized something. The trials of prosperity had not diminished him. They had forged him anew. He had learned to navigate both loyalty and deceit, generosity and greed. And through it all, he had held to the values that had carried him from a stable boy to a company owner. What he did not yet know was that the final chapter of this journey, the one that would seal his legacy, was just ahead. Years had passed since Kareem first stepped into Al-Sadiq Trading as its new owner. The modest two-story office near the harbor had grown into a respected name in the region's export business. Still, Kareem kept the same wooden desk, the same battered ledger he had used on his first day, and the same habit of visiting every department himself. The Sheikh often visited, sometimes to talk business, other times just to share tea and memories. They would sit in Kareem's small office, not in the palace, because Kareem insisted that this was where his life had truly turned a corner. "I gave you a company," the Sheikh said during one such visit, "but you have turned it into a lesson for everyone who works with you, that honor and profit can walk side by side." Kareem smiled. "I only walked the path you showed me, master. You taught me that trust is built in the shadows, when no one is watching." It was during one particularly busy season, with orders flooding in from Europe and Asia, that the city's Chamber of Commerce approached Kareem. They wanted him to deliver the keynote address at their annual gathering, attended by hundreds of business owners and leaders. At first, Kareem hesitated. He was not a man who sought the spotlight, but the Sheikh encouraged him. "Your story is not just yours, Kareem. It belongs to anyone who wonders whether loyalty still has a place in this world." On the day of the event, Kareem stood on the stage, wearing his usual simple attire rather than a lavish suit. He began not with his own achievements, but with the story of the palace during its years of hardship, of how the halls had grown quiet, of how friends had vanished, and of how one man's word could still stand when the gold was gone. "I did not stay with the Sheikh because I hoped for reward," Kareem told the audience. "I stayed because loyalty is not measured by seasons of plenty, but by winters of scarcity. And when reward came, it was not the money that mattered. It was a chance to prove that integrity can outlast fortune." The hall was silent when he finished. Then the applause came, long and sincere. That speech marked a turning point in Kareem's public life. Young entrepreneurs sought him out for guidance. Journalists wrote profiles about the servant who became a millionaire without losing his soul. His words were quoted in business seminars. Yet Kareem never let the praise settle too heavily on his shoulders. He still began each day by greeting his staff personally, still visited the markets to negotiate in person, and still shared tea with dock workers in the harbor. One afternoon, a young man fresh out of school came to the office looking for work. "I have no experience," the youth admitted, "but I will work hard if you give me a chance." Kareem saw in him a reflection of his younger self. "Then you will start in the storeroom," he said, "and work your way up. But remember, the value of your work is measured not only by your skill, but by your honesty." Time moved on, and Kareem began thinking about the future of the company. He had no children of his own, but he considered his employees as family. In a meeting one evening, he surprised them all by announcing his plan to turn Al-Sadiq Trading into an employee-owned business, with shares distributed among the staff. "This company was built on the strength of many hands," he told them. "It should belong to those hands, not just to my name." The Sheikh, hearing of the decision, visited him that night. "You honor me, Kareem," he said softly. "You have taken my gift and multiplied it, not in wealth, but in goodness." Kareem looked out at the moonlit harbor. "Master, when you gave me this company, you planted a seed. I have only tended it. Now it must grow beyond me." Years later, after Kareem had stepped back from daily operations, a new plaque appeared on the office wall. It read, In memory of Kareem, whose loyalty turned service into honor and honor into legacy, visitors to the harbor would still hear stories about him. How he had once brushed down horses in a palace stable, how he refused to abandon a master in hard times, and how he had built a company without compromising the principles that had guided his life. The Sheikh, older now, sometimes stood quietly before that plaque, his eyes misty. "He served me for 30 years, he would say to anyone who asked. But in truth, it was I who was served by his loyalty, his honesty, and his heart. And so, in the city's memory, Kareem lived on not just as a millionaire, but as a man who proved that loyalty, once given freely, can turn even the humblest servant into a legend.